Hey, hi everyone. Um, so being an entrepreneur has been the hardest, loneliest, and scariest thing I've ever done. Just imagine trying to build something from scratch with very little experience, very little resources and knowledge. Every step feels like an uphill battle. Every decision, I'm constantly doubting myself, and everything is super hard, especially when you're a first-time founder. So at the same time, I've been, running my own business, being a startup founder has been the best and most life-changing experience I've ever had. So today I would like to talk to you about my experience and three entrepreneurial observations I have founding different startups and the experiences I've had, the challenges I've faced, and some of the little victories that have kept me going. So I started as a fashion photographer, working for different, magazines, shooting editorials, working for brands, shooting campaigns, and photography was the first step for me into the world of design, the world of storytelling, and that's where I worked with a lot of different, designers, artists, directors, and one of the key things that I had in mind back then was I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to be, and that was a creative director. So photography led me to the world of fashion design, where I went to college in New York, and it was very smooth until the second year where I was studying fashion design and I did not know how to sew. And this was actually one of the pieces that I created. In fact, I failed a class, and because of this failure, because I failed one of the core classes, I was set back a year. And back then, I was absolutely devastated. It felt like I was completely lost, and my career was blown apart. And it was during that year when I had a lot of time spending, alone in New York. I was taking a couple of classes, but, again, it wasn't my full major. And that's when I started my first company. And this was a retail shop, right, in New York, right next to my university in downtown New York. And what was super interesting was that whole year, it was the first time that I learned how to set up something, how to sell, how to develop a product, and how to market a product. So I ran that business for 2 years, and I came back to Hong Kong right before COVID. I was finishing off my final year, and one of the things that, because of COVID, I couldn't get access to a lot of the sewing machines, all that stuff. And it turns out I started developing 3D garments. And because of, using digital twins, working with a lot of digital garments, augmented reality, virtual reality, that was where I got into my second startup. So I remember pitching or presenting my final thesis, with Parsons, and that was when I got the opportunity to work with a lot more designers within the school, within the fashion industry, to start developing my own brand and agency and working with artists in the tech space. So one of the things I want to talk about is to be an outsider. So um, when I was studying in the UK, I always felt like an outsider, where all of my friends, or at least most of my friends, went to study traditional business, politics, history. I was the only one in the year that went into fashion design. It was completely opposite to what others or a lot of my friends were going into. And at design school, I also felt like an outsider, having absolutely no knowledge of art or any basic design skills. But that was what allowed me to have a different perspective, a new perspective to how I see things. Same with what I was doing at photography. I was working with a lot of magazines, brands, but I was the only one, or the very few photographers that didn't have any technical knowledge about how to shoot a photo. All I understood was the image I wanted to create. So that allowed me to have a very different perspective and allowed me to, create new opportunities in the space. The second that I want to talk about is to find an intersection. So everything, from all my startups, I've been trying to merge two things together to create, a conversation. 2 years ago, when I came back to Hong Kong, I started a Web3 company, and I specifically worked with luxury brands, artists, and back then there were not a lot of companies doing the same thing in the digital luxury space. So we were one of the first ones, and seemingly back then it was a complete opposite of the spectrum. Luxury brands, it's all about craftsmanship, it's all about quality. And tech, where it's all blockchain developers, tech developers. Back then it was NFTs, and it seemed like a complete opposite. But where I found an interesting idea was to merge both of them to power new opportunities. And very similar with a new startup that I founded a couple of months ago was to merge 3D printing with footwear. And it's all about that disruption, disrupting traditional methods to kind of create new opportunities. And the third observation is to continue to learn, to continue to explore, but also to learn how to take a no. This was incredibly important throughout my startup journey. I've had thousands of people tell me it was never going to work. This idea is not going to work. This is the wrong time. You have the wrong team. It's the wrong concept. And taking a no is super important. I remember when I first started raising money for one of my startups, and I applied to maybe 100, 120 VCs, and they all said no. And I think it's super, super important to also not take it personally and understand that a lot of the times it's not the concept, but to just keep going and to just learn how to improve and to continue with that. This is actually one of the emails that I had with one of the funds that rejected during our fundraising round. And one of the key things I've always been sort of talking about is to understand, how do we take a no and how do we continue to improve? How do we, continue to grow as we move forward? Thank you very much.